Hi everybody, it's Nicole with Celestial Messages, and I'm here to talk to you guys about the retrograde planets that we are going through right now. So the planets that I'm going to talk about are Pluto, which went retrograde at the end of April, and then Saturn, Venus, and Jupiter, which went retrograde this month in May. And so let's start off by talking about what is a retrograde planet anyways. So when people hear the word retrograde, they often think about Mercury retrograde. And it kind of gives feelings of like, great, Mercury retrograde again. So what does it really mean when a planet is retrograde? Well, first off, it means that the planet's going backwards. But it really isn't going backwards in space. But from our view, it looks like it's going backwards. And the reason that it looks like this is actually because the planet is closer to Earth than it usually is. And that's probably why people feel the effects of retrogrades even more, because the planet's closer to Earth and we can feel the kind of energy that it's putting off stronger. So a retrograde doesn't have to be a negative thing. Basically what a retrograde is, it's a great time to go over something again, to really learn the lesson and have deeper realizations about it. Given if you didn't kind of learn the lesson or kind of do what you were supposed to the first time, it's not always a fun thing, but it doesn't have to be if you can look at it a different way, right? So let's take a look at Pluto, which went retrograde on April 25th, 2020, so at the end of April. And it will go direct again October 4th, 2020. And I just want to say, I'm not going to mention shadow periods here, but I really do think that shadow periods are important. I actually find that I personally experience a lot of the retrograde energy in the pre-shadow, sometimes in the post-shadow, but more so at those times than when the planet is actually retrograde. Oh, and I just wanted to point out, if you are someone who has a retrograde planet in your chart, so say, like we're going to talk about Saturn retrograde, right? For people who have Saturn retrograde in their natal chart already, they don't have as difficult of a time. That's more of the time for them to kind of sit down and do the work, right? It's kind of like opposite. So if you don't have Saturn retrograde, then, you're going to feel these effects. But if you do, it's a great time for you to kind of sit down and get to work and do what you need to do. And then when it goes direct again is kind of, let that energy flow and let that work that you did work for you. So that's just a little tip. I have 6 retrograde planets. Most of them are outer planets, and, a lot of people have the outer planets retrograde because they stay retrograde for so long in the year. And that's why Mercury stands out for people, because Mercury goes retrograde about 3 times a year. And so people notice that it's coming, right? Because it's coming, and then you wait a bit and then it comes again. So there's usually 3 retrograde periods in a year. Anyways, I digress. Let's go back to the Pluto retrograde that occurred April 25th. So Pluto went retrograde at 24 degrees of Capricorn, and it will go direct again at 22 degrees of Capricorn. So 24 and 22 degrees of Capricorn are actually big degrees and big hot spots this year. So the 24 degree Capricorn is where Jupiter conjuncted Pluto on April 5th. So when Jupiter and Pluto conjunct, there's a need for large scale transformation, and there's a need for the balance between the light and the dark. So basically, that's where it went retrograde, and it's going back to 22 degrees, and that is where Saturn and Pluto first conjuncted in January of 2020, and kind of set off this whole COVID-19 pandemic type of energy, right? So it was a starting point, and it was a starting point of the fall of the structures that we know of right now. And structure is very much a Saturn word, so the transformation of structures when Saturn and Pluto conjuncted. So Pluto is going back to that point to look at what can be redone or done in a different way, more transformation to take place. But basically it's looking at, okay, I've broken down the structures, I've done this, there's transformation is taking place. Let me go back and take a look at what still needs to be transformed, what still needs to be done in order to get to where we need to go. So that's what Pluto is doing right now, and he will be doing that until October. So the next retrograde that happened occurred on May 11th, and that was the Saturn retrograde. And Saturn retrograded from 1 degree Aquarius, and it's going to go back to 25 degrees Capricorn. And that happens May 11th to May 29th. And so Saturn moved into Aquarius, and it's kind of been in that 1 degree mark of Aquarius, and it's kind of just like dipping its toes into the Aquarian energy, saying, let's have a taste, let's see what this is like. And Aquarius represents technology, so things like Zoom calls and being more in touch with people through that way would represent Aquarian type of energy. Aquarius also represents humanitarian efforts and the desire to be free. So Saturn kind of puts a bit of a damper on that, but says, okay, let's build new structures in this energy. But first, let me go back into the Capricorn energy. Let me re-examine what is being taken down, the structures that need to go, the new structures that need to be built with this new energy when I step into it. And basically, Saturn is one of the planets that will herald in the new energy and build those new structures and systems, right? But first it needs to go back into Capricorn to look at the systems that we had in place, that we have in place, and see what's working and what isn't, and what needs to happen for that new energy to kind of step into play. So the next planet that went retrograde was May 13th, 2020, and that was Venus in the sign of Gemini, and it will be retrograde until June 25th, 2020. So it retrograded at 21 degrees of Gemini, and it's going to go back to 5 degrees of Gemini. So Venus represents love, beauty, harmony, relationships, what you value, money. The social and relationship aspect is strong with the Gemini energy here. You may find yourself going over old issues in your relationships in order to heal them fully. It is suggested that you don't start a new relationship during a Venus retrograde, because chances are, if you do, that relationship will end. But it's also suggested that if you're in a relationship and you break up, if you want to stay broken up, don't break up during a Venus retrograde, because the person will just come back. So with Venus being in Gemini too, it's saying that to look at situations as if there's two paths, as if there's two ways to go. Also as if there are two truths. It's going back over the communication, because Gemini rules communication. And if we look at the communications that's been coming out, like in the news or even with each other, it's kind of the retrograding period, right? Like, everybody's right. No one really wants to listen to anybody else. But the truth is, nobody knows what's going on. Nobody actually knows the truth. And that's in part due to the Venus retrograde in Gemini, but also because the nodes did move into Gemini for the North Node and Sagittarius for the South Node. So that happened in May, I think May 5th. So basically, the South Node is kind of your beliefs and what you're stuck in, because it's in Sagittarius, and you believe this to be true, and this is the way it is. But the North Node is asking you to look at it, research, communicate, look at the bigger picture for what's being said and what's being put out there. I would also suggest during a Venus retrograde, especially this one is squaring Neptune, don't make any large purchases if you don't have to. Also, if you can help it, don't cut your own hair while we're in quarantine during a Venus retrograde. It's probably a best bet not to. And so the last retrograde planet I'm going to talk about is Jupiter retrograde. It went retrograde May 14th. And it will go direct September 12th, 2020. It retrograded at 27 degrees Capricorn, and it will go back to 17 degrees Capricorn. So when Jupiter goes retrograde, we will most likely go over our beliefs. Was that the right belief? Was it a false belief? Do we still have the same beliefs? Are you willing to take an honest approach and take a look at what others believe? Do you have an open mind? So Jupiter also rules over things such as law and religion and foreign countries. Jupiter goes over cultural expectations. So Jupiter is going to really have us take a look at the structures, our beliefs about them, because soon Jupiter will be making a huge energy shift into Aquarius. And you might think, why is that such a big deal? Jupiter changes signs every year, and that's very true. But this is a larger cycle that's occurring, and it involves Saturn and Jupiter, and many believe that this upcoming event to be the true marker of the age of Aquarius. So when Saturn and Jupiter conjunct each other in the sign of Aquarius, which is an air sign, that's what a lot of astrologers see as like the actual marker of the age of Aquarius coming into fruition. Obviously, we've been in the energy of the age of Aquarius, like coming up, but once that happens, we are truly in the age of Aquarius. So these conjunctions have happened in Earth signs for the last 200 or so years. I might do a bigger podcast on this whole thing. Let me know if you guys are interested. So anyways, my Gemini mind is all over the place, and let's get back to talking about the retrogrades. So I just want to say that I will be back soon with a quick talk about Mercury going retrograde in June. And other than that, I hope you guys have a fantastic day, week, few months, and I will see you guys really soon. Please like, share, and subscribe my videos, and thank you for all of you guys who support me, and talk to you soon.